College Green by Max Porter. Read by Sanjeev Bhaskar.
This has a wooden hammer beam roof of a span wider than Westminster Hall. The light comes in a most unmedieval way by glazing along the ridge. I flick through Pevsner's North Somerset and Bristol on the train, anticipating the route I thought Ross and I might take through the city. Pevsner is such good company, and so too was the 20-year-old me, who had left ecstatic notes in the margins of the book. I'd found Bristol Cathedral jaw-droppingly good. I'd scribbled, "Incredible vault, the Lians." I remember that day, trying to take in the grand scheme of it all, but bombarded by the detail, the foliage, the friezes and heads, the endless layered surprises. The Elder Lady Chapel is a miracle. This was before I'd even been to Wells or Durham or Ely. Young me had written in nice lettering on the title page, "A building never stops. A building is always telling 1,000 simultaneous stories." I don't know if this was a quote or me being awestruck. Pompous. I know my trip to Bristol cemented my obsession. I wanted to spend my life reading ecclesiastical buildings. Church nerd, my wife calls me. Ross had texted to say he would be under the information board. I felt oddly nervous. Friends from school aren't like friends we've met as adults. We've seen the unformed in each other. We feel obliged to maintain contact, but we don't really know each other. I was almost ready to stop answering Ross's occasional emails and let the friendship fade until he said he lived in Bristol, and if I was ever down, then the famous Saturday mornings at College Green were totally worth seeing. I wanted to revisit the cathedral, and I did want to see what all the fuss was about on College Green, so I said I'd jump on a train. I heard her name buzzing up and down the train carriage. Megan. And as I idly scrolled through my phone, I saw that Megan was trending. The moment before meeting someone tires me out. What will they be like? Did I ever know them? Will I say or do something stupid? Will we pass the time without awkwardness or incident? Have they aged? And then somewhat tragically, oh yes, that's them. Ross. A run-of-the-mill flesh construction. Everyman. Not as tall as I remembered, ruddier. Barbershop neatness on the sideburns and necklines of his standard dad hairstyle. Collar turned up, expensive sporty coat. An appearance that spoke clearly and truthfully of its constituent parts. Rugby, recruitment consultancy, BMW washed regularly, ever so slightly right-of-centre politics, Midlist English, affluent, culturally unengaged beyond Panto and Coldplay. Yes, that's Ross. And yes, the original floor plan of the boy is still visible, especially the grin, like a drawbridge, part welcome, part threat. "Yes, mate," he said as I dodged out of the crowd towards him. "Welcome." "This is how it is now," he said as we left the station, nodding at the river of wrapped bodies making their way patiently down the hill from Temple Meads, past the huge digital screen with the hashtag Megan and the flashing arrow. Thousands. Every week, unless it's raining. Mind you, Bristol is the capital city of sensible outdoor gear, so even when it's raining, it's still heaving. People love it. "Well, that's some fairly snazzy outdoor clothing you got yourself, mate," I said. It felt clunky as I said it, the word mate. I don't spend much time with men. Ross is an old friend, and I doubt he would have noticed me using the word, let alone felt it was awkward or unpractised. "I won't lie," said Ross. "This coat cost me a small fortune, but it's breathable." "Breathable is good," I said, and wished I was alone. As we shuffled along with small steps in the throng of people, down the taxi-clad incline and away from the station, I wondered if he replayed his comments in his head, as I do. Was he asking himself these questions, as I was? He clapped me hard on the back. "Anyway, fuck, it's good to see you, man." I grinned. I couldn't clap him in return because my hands were in my pockets, and he kept his arm on my back. I didn't want our arms to become tangled if I reciprocated. Better to keep separate. Two distinct entities. So I just smiled and said, "It really is." And again with better uplift, "It really is." The crowd had stopped, waiting for the green man. "God, this is all new," I said. "A never-ending development," said Ross. "It's changed a bit since you were here. Anyway, fuck. Tell me everything. Wife? Babies? Work?" "Ah, man," I said. "Where to start?" And I felt foolish saying that, because he had just provided me an easy structure for my reply. I wanted to answer quickly before he rephrased the question. I knew he would. I knew he would say something like, "You're still banging away at the buildings, is that right?" So I wanted to get in quickly with the facts. Yes, a wife. Yes, kids. Or I could be more honest and say, "Oh, Ross, can we not do the catch-up chat? I don't want to pretend to be interested in you or interesting to you. We just knew each other at school. We don't owe each other knowledge or facts of our lives. Can't we just walk along in silence and get to College Green and see this thing, this spectacle, whatever it is, and go home?" But in the pause, while I overthought it, sure enough, Ross came back for more. And I realised how out of practice I was chatting to a bloke. I had no ease, no intuition about flow, pace and rhythm. It was like bad tennis. Ross had good and well-taught ground strokes. "Uncle Google tells me you're properly a famous nerd now." "No, not really. I don't think any architectural historians are famous." "Bullshit, man. I know for a fact you're big in the architecture world." "Big in Japan." "Really?" "No, I was joking. You know, the song?" "But actually, to be honest, I am actually quite big in Japan. I taught for a term in Japan last year." "Oh man, that's crazy. Very cool. So you can make a decent living writing about buildings?" That was quick, I thought. "Honestly," I said, "it's not something a person does for the money." Ross laughed and clapped me again on the back. I grinned and wished I was a long way away. Grin, change the subject. "What about you? Tell me all." I didn't want him to tell me anything, let alone all, but I wanted to walk along, not looking at him, not speaking, and the crowd was moving so slowly. It pained me not to be peeling off from the throng to spend an hour in St. Mary Redcliffe. No matter, I thought. I've seen it before, and I'll see it again. Queen Elizabeth called St. Mary Redcliffe the fairest, goodliest, and most famous parish church in England. Comparisons of fame are odious, but as far as aesthetic ambitions and aesthetic achievement go, St. Mary need not fear comparison with any other English parish church. "Well, on your left is St. Mary Redcliffe, which is where my second son sings in the choir. He is like worryingly into the whole thing, saying his prayers before bed and all that. Worse habits, I suppose, but we are mildly alarmed. Don't want him to end up the main attraction down College Green, you know. My eldest is cool, very into his skating. Can you believe skateboarding is still the thing? And Charlotte's great, bit bored at work, but fine. She tolerates me." We crossed the road in front of the church in silence. I could think of no adequate reply. I wondered what complexities and agonies his banal little life survey concealed. I wished, always, to cut through or move past these polite little conversational dances, the middle-class synopsis, boring to tell, even more boring to hear. But maybe it really is that dull for Ross and Charlotte. I remembered that Ross was prone to startling unkindness in a group. "Do you remember when you put my football kit in the toilet?" "Mate, fuck, that is brutal. Bang, right out of left field, he brings the traumatic memory. No, wasn't me, it was Chris." "Really? I think it was you." "Swear on my adult life it was Christopher King. Wow, those were the days. Such little shits. Do you want to stop for coffee?" Ross was impatient in the queue for coffee. He got his coffee there regularly, he said, and the service wasn't usually this slow, but it would be worth it. He checked his phone constantly and said we had plenty of time. I was replaying our previous conversation in my mind. Nope, it wasn't me, it was Chris. The speed of it after all these years, the barefaced lie, almost violent as a reflex, guilty but also vicious. I pitied him, this simmering rage writ large on his face, just as it was when we were boys for all to see. We rejoined the crowd, plodding shoulder to shoulder down the side of Queen Square, and Ross was talking, slightly warily I felt, about the renaming of key Bristol monuments to acknowledge the fact that Bristol was built on slavery. "That's good, isn't it?" I asked. He looked at me, sideways, as he sipped the coffee from the little hole in the plastic lid. In that look was the whole history of our relationship, and the small political differences between people. At least I felt it was all there in the look. Perhaps Ross was thinking what an arsehole I was. Perhaps he, like me, was wondering whether he could be bothered to have a disagreement. What good would come of an argument between us about heritage? There is no room in the dance of slight familiarity, two sort of friends sniffing each other's characters after many years, for an argument about colonialism. "Yes," he said, "it's good." We were 12-year-old boys. We were at a standstill, bodies behind us, bodies in front. I considered the crowd. There were a lot of families. Many people carried small children in slings or backpacks or on their shoulders. There were groups of friends. What I couldn't see were any other male couples, as Ross and I were. Man friends, on a walk to see the famous Saturday morning at College Green. Work together, play sport together, drink and eat together, text funny messages and gifts to each other, but perhaps walking together through a city, talking or not, confronting each other or not, perhaps that's rather uncommon. "Mate," said Ross, "it's crazy to see you." I smiled. We trudged slowly along, through the gap by the Arnolfini, over the cobbled street and onto the footbridge to the wharf. This part of Bristol was different to how I remembered it. Smarter, cleaner. There was a festive atmosphere. People were laughing and joking. Parents jollied their kids along with songs and games. A busker was playing the accordion, and it made me wish I was in a European city with my wife. She had said to me, "Send my love to Bristol, church nerd." "I will," I'd said. I looked to our left across the docks and muttered, "Sophie sends her love." Across the floating harbour is a 2-storied warehouse with extremely florid carving in its pediment and a domed polygonal turret. The civic authorities of Bristol have not managed with imagination this vital open space. Ross was listing friends from school he was still in touch with. I didn't care, didn't even remember some of the names. Skelton is minted and gay, apparently. Paul Nowak was briefly famous in the tech world and then died of cancer. James is still a twat. Posh Henry went full posh and married a horsey bird. I can hardly listen. I never liked anyone, really. I did what I had to do to get through it. I mostly kept quiet, like a dog paddling down a river. Time passed. I swam and finally reached the sea. "Fuck," says Ross. "Did you hear about Jeremy Kingdom?" I have no recollection of Jeremy Kingdom, and I can't be bothered to pretend. Who was Jeremy Kingdom? Are you serious? Oh man, my memory is really shit. I could almost smell disappointment on Ross. Cold coffee and sadness. His old pal from school was as good as a stranger. A freak who doesn't remember Jezza Kingdom, who writes academic books about architecture and brings up teenage cruelty. He indicated his empty coffee cup and wriggled through the crowd towards the bin. I waited. Bodies passing on either side like a slow-motion stampede made of water-resistant fabric, flesh, wool, and curiosity. I thought how beautiful it would be if this huge crowd of people were suddenly separated into neat perspex boxes of their component parts and stacked up on the side of the wharf. A huge wall of blood, a huge wall of bone, teeth, boxes and boxes of hair, a few hundred boxes of eyeballs, hundreds of hats, thousands of shoes. It made me smile to think of Ross asking me, "Would you go through all those boxes and find the bits of me? Mate, would you reassemble me for old time's sake? Like the true believers reassemble saints?" I would not, Ross. I was smiling as he weaved his way back to me, and he took it as permission to continue turning the rusty banter wheel of reminiscence. He told me the tale of kingdom, of cryptocurrency and hubris, crime and the absence of punishment, and I nodded and said, "No way, that's mad." "It was, mate," said Ross, "and none of us had a fucking clue." As we emerged at the foot of Park Street, the city was a natural amphitheatre, and we were met by a sudden roar, a many-thousand-strong voice. It made my nose vibrate and my kidneys ache. It's hard to visualise College Green as it was before the shops of Park Street invaded the inside. As things are now, the municipality was perhaps right in turfing the whole area so smoothly and building an ornamental pool in front of the council house. The Queen Victoria Monument by Boehm, 1888, looks a little forlorn at the E-tip. "Fuck," said Ross. "They're bringing her out. Let's get a groove on." He started to squeeze past people as if he had front-row seats. "Sorry, mate. Oops. Excuse me, pal." And I despised him. But I followed, hunched, mortified, scattering apologies as we cut through the thickening crowd. People were chanting, "Megan, Megan, Megan." Ross waited for me, beaming by a bench. "Result. Perfect view, but room to breathe. Not so close we get crushed, and an easy escape once it's done. Welcome, my friend." Earlier awkwardness was forgotten, or I'd imagined it, or Ross was immune to such emotional nuances. Either way, he clapped me hard on the back again, his way of communicating positive feeling. "You're going to love this. It's like nothing else. Get your phone out, mate. It can be over pretty quickly." There was a wooden frame on a raised platform in front of the fountains. A dozen or so people were fixing things and adjusting ropes. Megan seemed tiny. One small woman in a white dress, no longer causing a problem. "Shit," said Ross. "She is seriously small. She's quite fit, at least from this distance." Long concave front meant as a screen at the end of the College Green triangle, the screen character is stressed by the utmost entirely plain, four-storied, pale brick facade on a stone basement and by the big hipped roof. His phone rang from his pocket, and he took it out and answered. If he truly understood why this was a special occasion, I thought to myself, then he wouldn't have answered his phone. "Yeah," he said, "it's mad down here. Can you hear the noise?" "Yeah, it's Megan. I don't know, early 20s, late teens. She's crazy young. Doesn't seem such a threat right now." "Yeah, he's great. Hasn't changed a bit. Crazy to see him after all these years." I clenched my jaw and focused on the events on stage. The men had lifted Megan's arms into a cruciform posture and were tying ropes to her wrists before looping them around some kind of winch-like contraptions at the corners of the frame. "Yep," continued Ross, "I'll pick something up. Maybe chicken nuggets. Not sure I can be asked to do a proper shop. Might take this fella for a pint after Megan's done her thing." A fashionably dressed teenager in front of us was sarcastically robot dancing as his friends chanted, "Megan, go Megan." "They've had nuggets once this week, that's hardly every day." People were shushing the dancing boy and his friends. The crowd was getting quieter. On the hipped roof, two gilt unicorns. One may regret the missed opportunity for a proud modern public building at Bristol. "Better go, love. It's Megan o'clock here." "OK, cool. Yep, you too." "Yep, will do. OK, laters." I got my phone out and started filming the star-shaped figure. She was naked now, stripped of her dress. Many thousands of phones were trained on her. A small screen behind the stage flashed up reminders to use the correct hashtags. It felt important to film. I wanted to remember the way the cathedral dwarfed the little naked Megan, the way the beige, star-shaped body seemed to echo the tension of the buttresses. Cathedral and Megan seemed in complex conversation about longevity and action. One body meant to last, permanently achieving structural perfection, one taken to a temporary limit, a demonstration of what comes after strength. It felt important to record it, so I could think about what the cathedral had witnessed. Ross nudged me. "I don't like it when it's so quiet," he said. I shrugged and focused on keeping my phone steady. He nudged me again. He was like a child. Must be so cool to do something you really love for a living. You really love buildings, don't you? Yes, I whispered. They are my obsession. I could just see the way you look at them, the way you look around you the whole time. I felt a rush of warm feelings towards Ross, as if I'd stepped into a side chapel and seen his full breadth or his chancel. Not such bad design after all. But the council house has undeniably more character than similarly traditional buildings in other English cities. 4 men took up positions at each winch and gave them a turn or two, and Megan was lifted into the middle of the frame, taut. I turned and quietly said to Ross, "That's how I sleep when I'm in hotels. Fully using the bed, you know?" Ross gave me a slightly embarrassed half-smile, as if I'd said something crushingly silly. It made me feel a bit tense, a bit annoyed, as if I was in charge of the atmosphere, as if Ross would only enjoy the morning if I pitched my chat just right. Too much to make a joke, not enough to film it quietly. "This is amazing," I said. Ross kept staring forward. He looked uneasy. "You okay, Ross?" I asked, weirdly wishing for the jovial back-clapping of earlier to return. "Just watching this, mate. Just want to watch if that's okay." Well, I thought, how the tables have turned. Me trying to make this fun, hoping Ross enjoys his morning. Ross just trying to watch. So we watched. The 4 men winched again, and there was some oohs from the crowd. Ross was shaking his head. "Are you okay, Ross? You're not having fun?" "It's..." He turned to me and he looked suddenly much older and frightened. It's just, I don't actually love this, mate, if I'm being honest. I don't know why." "What, Megan? Today? Or this in general? I thought you enjoyed it." I'm sorry. I don't know why it's bothering me today. She looks really nice. I don't know." I felt like a boxer, standing over a flawed opponent, all aggression and competition grotesquely flushed from the encounter, pitiable human lying helpless beneath me. I looked at him. The crowd was quiet. I thought of taking him away, going back the way we came, 2 mates working their way apologetically through the crowds back to the coffee shop. We could pinpoint his unease, talk it through, leave Megan where she was, stretched to her limits, miraculous, in proportion to her surroundings, a bodily echo of the 13th century clarity, a masterpiece of diagonal design, preventing the eye from reposing on the rectangularity of the surrounds. We could cherish that image. We could cherish that splendid design. Yes, I thought, maybe we could unpack the morning. I could tell him how it really felt when he flushed my uniform. I could take Pevsner from my bag and read to him of transept windows and cross-ribbed vaults, OG arches and stained glass. He could tell me that his life is shallow, like a spoon, that there's nothing in it. Suddenly, I realized I was not just any bloke. I was someone he thought he knew, and I could help him. I could help him, or I could hurt him. But at that moment, as we were looking at each other, Megan called out, more a chime than a shout, like a tubular bell being cleanly struck with a rubber mallet. An extraordinary sound, not a sound a human could make unless she was snapping. The sound bounced off the buildings and echoed once behind the crowd, as if to confirm deftly that it had been a real sound. Ross was staring at me. He seemed about to cry. "Can we go, mate?" he asked. "No, Ross," I said. All through the martyrdom of Megan, the whoops, the songs, the extraordinary sounds of a body wrenched apart and a city thrilled, Ross and I stared at each other. It was very intimate. People build things to last because the body rips and comes apart. Because we are flesh, we need stone. Twice more he asked me, "Can we go, please? Please, can we leave?" And twice more I said, "No, Ross." That kind of balance is too simple to become the Bristol style. But I admit, after the thrills of the chancel interiors, one tends to be impatient with what is the respectable performance of a sensible architect. He did weep. While Megan screamed her final prayers and condemnations, while Bristol clapped and roared and sang her name, thanked her for the spectacle, tweeted, WhatsApped and grammed her. He looked pathetic, structureless, shapeless. Of all the things I expected from Ross, it never occurred to me that he would be squeamish. It seems such an unlikely thing in this day and age. The mess on the stage was already being cleared away. Details were on the screen of next week's martyr, a man, the date, and hashtag Liam. Above the noise of the crowd, I shouted into Ross's ear, I don't have many male friends. I'm more used to churches than people, but we should do this again. I'm sorry today was weird. And he leant into my ear, and his breath was hot. It was great. I'm sorry I ruined it. Will you show me around the cathedral? Please? I've never been in. So I took my old friend Ross inside the great ship and showed him textbook Gothic vaulting. I showed him trefoils in the spandrels. I showed him the gables with their joyously frisky finials. And I showed him countless tombs of dead people. I explained to him that the main thing happening in a building is not actually the stuff, the stone, the wood, the glass. It's actually the space. Emptiness carefully orchestrated. It's how a building like this engages the human and directs them towards the divine. You think about yourself and the body, and the building invites you to think about all that is bigger and longer lasting. Megan's done the same for me, I guess, said Ross as we gazed up at the roof. The flash of genius in the arrangement is that in each little vault the cell resting on the bridge is simply left out. That makes the traverse arch and ribs on the middle of the bridge stand as if it were on tiptoes, a tightrope feet right up there. I took my bag off my back, unzipped it, and found my Pevsner. I got a pen and I put a line through my initials and wrote Ross's name. He took the book. We were smack bang in the middle of the crossing, and I put my arms around him as he sobbed. And we stood still, and people stopped to look at us, men especially. The men in the cathedral stopped to look at us, men who had come here to see Megan martyred, and they saw how we were using the building, how we were using our bodies in the space. And I'm no expert, but I think they were jealous.
Hello, I'm Andrew O'Hagan. Thank you so much for listening to Esquire's summer fiction series in aid of UNICEF UK's Save Generation COVID appeal, which is supporting children and families impacted by coronavirus across the world. Please donate at www.unicef.org.uk/generationcovid. Thank you.